All right, everyone. Today we're going to talk about something that was the most meaningful bit of advice that I've ever received, and I recently was asked, what the sort of most pivotal bit of advice I received in my own mapping was, and I always come back to this moment in 2020 where I was modding a map from some newer mapper, and I was a newer mapper at this time too. I was a very new mapper actually. Only been mapping for about 6 to 8 months or so, and I had modded this map, and I had sent it to Lhasa, who at the time was uh, an NAT member of the NAT, very experienced modder, and still of course is. Not a member of the NAT anymore, but that's mostly because he served his time and he is very much so deserving of his retirement. But basically, I talked to Lasse for about 10 minutes, and he actually ended up spending about most of the time basically flaming the map rather than my mods, which I thought was really funny. But he did say something that was really, really impactful. So first, I'm going to propose you a question before I explain what that is. And, that question is, and I should have found this first. Where did it go? What the heck? Oh, okay. Here it is. So I'm going to propose you a question. Why did I map this rhythm with two kick sliders, right? So we'll get rid of this. Why did I use this kick slider rhythm for this? Right? So you may be like, oh, it's because it fits the vocals, right? And that kind of thing. But let me propose this, right? What if I just did this? Right? Or what if I made it less spaced, right? What if I did a quick stream, right? Some circles, right? I think all of those rhythms would be perfectly justified, right? The two circles, like this is a very common way of mapping two different vocals. But I didn't do it for a very particular reason. So we'll come back to this. I'm going to show you the map that Lasse that I had sent to Lasse, which is this one right here. And again, this is a newer mapper. And when I showed Lasse this, again, he spent much of the time, much of like the 10 minutes we were chatting. I wish I had the chat history, but Osu doesn't keep it that long. He spent a lot of it kind of flaming the map. And the thing that stood out to me so much was when he called this jump pattern here circle vomit. Like he's notoriously blunt, so he's called this circle vomit, which I found very amusing at the time. But very quickly I realized, hey, there's more to that than just being antagonistic, right? There's some actual truth to it, right? What's the problem with this? Well, if you notice, the vocal starts here and the violin starts here and there's a drum here. But they have this jump pattern, right? This back and forth for the vocals, right? And they have that comboing indicating that that's what they're mapping is the vocals. And let's remember, guys, the comboing, new combos, indicate to the viewer, the player or the mapper that's looking at your map, what your intentions are. The combos do not indicate, or the combos do not have any sort of emphasis themselves. You don't play combos, you don't feel combos, you don't move combos, you don't click combos, you just see combos, right? And that's not really an active form of emphasis. That's not a good form of emphasis. What they do effectively, though, is they separate patterns. They group patterns. They indicate what you're putting together and trying to indicate to the viewer, right? So looking at this, it's very clear that the mapper is trying to group this pet together. But the problem is that they go from slider dominant rhythms, to the jumps, and the important emphasis is here, but they're starting the jumps here, right? If they want this jump pattern to have really any meaningful emphasis, starting the jumps here, starting the clicking here, it just completely undermines it, right? And it's very clearly unintentional. And yeah, the reason that it's here is for the clap, right? There is absolutely a clap on this hit. But is that clap important? Does it actually matter? Is it following a melody or the the structure of the song or the structure of the map, right? Is somebody going to remember that clap? Is that clap going to stand out when you're playing? Sort of all these questions you should be asking yourself. And I think in this case, there's really no significant here, nothing significant here, whereas the melody is here with the vocals. So really the better way of mapping this is probably something like this, where they separate the and you can still map that with that clap passively like this, right? So it's not completely ignored, but you put the emphasis on where the clicking starts here with that. So it'll feel a lot more satisfying and more directly connected to the song when you do it this way. And this is just one option for fixing this rhythm. It could be something like this, right? Something like that works just fine. But it's clear that to them that the claps are not even important given the fact that they ignored this one, right? So claps are clearly not significant to the mapper, and all these circles or all these sliders are mapping the vocals. So up until this point, the mapper had been cluing in the player that, oh, we're following the vocals. And then all of a sudden we have this random circle that doesn't. Completely, causes the map to some degree fall apart. It causes this section here to fall apart. When you extrapolate these ideas across the entire map, you get, sort of a newer mapper map, right? Whereas when you look at more experienced mappers, they use rhythm choice and patterning to more directly group things in the song together in the map. So let's go back to my map that we were using as the example. Right here. What's the reason that I use kick sliders instead of circles or another rhythm? Is because I simply want to separate the pattern here. I want to separate the rhythm. I want this to be the emphasized part where I go back to clicking circles. And so by making these sort of sliders, I effectively separate those without making this, not intense enough, right? Sort of still fitting the intensity of the song here without being excessive. So I can go back to the clicking here and notice that I use grouping as well here. So I have the triangle and then I expand that triangle and then I expand the triangle again into just linear stuff. So these are sort of back and forths. It's very clear that it's happening because there's these overlaps that are done intentionally to group these into a bigger pattern, but with individual points of emphasis within them. That's what's critical about the whole conversation I had with Lasse, is that it applies to more than just rhythm. It applies to everything in the map. Let's remember that how contrast is created. Contrast is how we create emphasis, and that can only happen if there is a change, right? There has to be a change. If you go from circle to circle, there is no contrast because you are already doing circle. If you go from slider to slider, same thing. When you go from slider to circle, now there's a change, and that has a form of contrast and therefore emphasis, right? It emphasizes where that change occurs. So if the slider was first changing to a circle, the circle is now emphasized. In this case, going from the sliders to the circle, now that the circle rhythms are being emphasized as a result of that change. All these other ones are being less emphasized by the fact that they're already circles, right? So then when I do the repeat slider, it's emphasized. So I use the repeat slider to then create the separation from circle to slider so that then I can go back to circle for the stream, and it makes the stream have a little bit more of a kick. Now, the length of that you do it, right? So because I had circles and I only had one slider before it, there's not a ton of emphasis on this because the change was not very long, right? It didn't happen very long. So I still remember, oh, I was just clicking circles. Now I'm still clicking circles again. Very small separation, but it separates these rhythms, right? There is a distinct separation. Whereas if I just did this, I'm doing a bunch of jumps, and yeah, the stream has, it is a stream. But, realistically, when you hear this rhythm, this is a clear like triple burst. But the reason I didn't do triples here, and I did a slider instead, wasn't because I found the triple to be too intense, but it was because I didn't want to do triple into more effectively longer triples, right? By making this like that, I separate it because this drum rhythm is not the same instrument that I'm following here. I'm following the synth here, or like the piano here, with this repeat, and then it's drums here. And I don't want to use the same rhythm for two separate things right next to each other. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't follow the song. It's just very bad. So that's something to consider. So really, oftentimes this rhythm separation, the patterning separation, is what's going to define your rhythm and patterning. Trying to group these so that you place the emphasis where it matters. So hopefully what I talked about made sense and you got something of value out of it. For the experienced mappers out there, this is going to be like a no-brainer to you. This will be really obvious, but I think that newer mappers really struggle with this. This is not something that is really super often talked about, and it's a really important concept that you can learn to apply to make your maps good at the end of the day, right? What I recommend is that you, with this in mind, go and look at other maps out there and see if you can see this in the recently ranked map section, for example. And I guarantee you will see this idea of rhythm separation and patterning and grouping applied there as well. So hopefully it was as meaningful for you as it was for me to get this brain expansion moment, if you will.